Welcome, everyone. Oh, that's nice and loud. Welcome. My name is Mike MURAWSKI. I'm Director of Learning and Community Partnerships here at the Portland Art Museum. And it's so great to see everybody here for this wonderful program this evening. The Portland Art Museum is situated in the heart of downtown Portland, Multnomah County, Oregon, a place which rests on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River. On behalf of the Portland Art Museum, I wish to recognize the indigenous peoples of this region, on whose ancestral lands this museum now stands, and on whose lands we gather here this evening. We pay respect to their elders past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, settlement, and resilience that bring us together here this evening. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Special thanks also to Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, the museum's Native Art Advisory Group, the Native American Art Council, and Key Bank Foundation for their generous support of this exhibition and the Center for Contemporary Native Art, Not Fragile, and programming like tonight. And continued thanks and enormous gratitude to Ryan Feddersen, who curated the exhibition that's on view in the gallery now, and that will be the topic of tonight's discussion, for bringing this exhibition together and working with the team here at the museum and all the artists involved in the exhibition. And it's a huge honor to have Ryan here tonight for this program, facilitating the conversation, as well as Corky Clairmont, Lillian Pitt, and Nicholas Galanin. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Ryan, and we can go ahead and get started. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. I want to start by talking a little bit about the framing of the exhibition, and to especially thank the Portland Art Museum and the Center for Contemporary Native Art for giving me this opportunity. This is my second curatorial project. I'm a visual artist based in Tacoma, Washington, and I specialize in large-scale interactive installation and public art. And so I see curatorial work as something I do as a part of arts activism. And it was wonderful to work with the museum, and I'm so excited to have three of the artists here with us tonight. So Not Fragile looks at glass as a medium for exploring other content. Though often associated with delicacy, glass is forged through intense and violent forces, a meteorite impacting the earth, a nuclear bomb detonating a 2,000-degree crucible. Humans have been working in glass for nearly 5,000 years. As a technology, it has transformed our society, and likewise, we have transformed glass through our continuous explorations of its properties. Our relationship with glass as a material of industry, technology, and artistry is ever shifting. In this exhibition, artists underscore the power of traditional iconography, craft bold social statements, and reflect the beauty, vulnerability, and transformative power of glass. The majority of artists included in Not Fragile do not work exclusively in glass. They are continually making choices on how different materials support the content of their work. Glass carries with it a depth of history and connotations. It's acutely tied to our sense of safety and security, sustenance, and even spirituality. In the selection of artwork for the exhibition, I was drawn to artists whose work in glass represents consistent themes within their work, their individual practice, as well as greater concurrence within the contemporary and traditional Native arts worlds. Specifically with us tonight, we have Lillian Pitt, whose cast lead crystal mask, She Who Watches, invokes ancestral power through storytelling, transforming She Who Watches into a glass figure. Corky Clairmont, whose blown glass container, double-headed arrow, draws on his social activism and reminds us of the power of the choices that we make. And Nicholas Galanin's mirror and vinyl installation Byproduct, which comments on culture, consumption, and identity. Many of these pieces have clear and evident inspirations. Others lie just under the surface. In each work, the artist utilizes glass in innovative ways to impart messages of strength, resilience, and insubordination. And so I'd like to start before our conversation with each artist giving a brief presentation. I think it adds a lot of context to the conversation. And so first up with us, we're going to have Lillian Pitt. a renowned artist from the Big Water Columbia River region of the Pacific Northwest. She's born on the Warm Springs Reservation in Oregon, and she's a descendant of the Wasco, Yakima, and Warm Springs people. She's one of the most highly regarded Native American artists in the Pacific Northwest. Her works have been exhibited and reviewed regionally, nationally, and internationally, and she has been the recipient of numerous awards and distinctions. Her awards include the 2007 Earl A. Chiles Award for Lifetime Achievement, the 1990s Governor Award of the Oregon Arts Commission, which declared that she had made significant contributions to the growth and development of the cultural life in Oregon. Please join me in welcoming Lillian Pitt.
What do we do? Just pretend it's on?
Oh, it is on. So
It's
you can hit
there.
this arrow right there.
Oh, hip, hip, hooray. All right. Okay, as you know, in the gorge, Shaglal has been there for thousands of years, and that has given me the inspiration for all these years to do the image in different media and to use it however I want. I use it in jewelry and prints and glass and bronze, and it's a forever energy giving to me. And because she watched the village where my great-great-grandmother lived, and the village is now under the Dalles Dam's floodwaters. And so so I continue to make her and share her, and she goes along with the story, and I think most of you have heard the story, and so we will just continue and try and catch up on time. Joe Cantrell took this picture, and he used different lenses, and there's more petroglyphs that have been there for thousands of years. You can't see them with the visual, with just visually. You have to have the special lens. And so I think this is just absolutely beautiful. A Pat Gold piece, there's a Wapas or Wasco Sally bag or Wisham Sally bag, and I love the people in it. And then what made me start doing these is 2 years ago we did a workshop at Evergreen, and Dan Friday was blowing some glass, and it was just really so much fun. Nobody was signing up, and then all of a sudden I thought I'd sign up, see what it does for me in blowing glass, and then talk to everybody else into signing up. so it was just like when I first touched clay. It was just magic, and so I just wanted to do it all the time. But little did I know it was going to be so expensive, and I thought, how do I get these images up? And so I have a lot of friends who are so helpful and so intelligent and have good ideas. And someone said, get a water jet cutter and they'll cut all your images for you. And so this is a black glass cut in the basket designs. And they're only 3 inches tall. And here's how many. I get carried away. And so I didn't know how many. These are used just once. And Dan Friday was the glass blower, and he was so helpful. And then I wanted more depth. And so I got some aluminum and took those to the water jet cutter. And these again are 3 inches, and then when you see them get blown up into a huge basket, it's just incredible. And so, it gave me another way of telling my story of my ancestors, of the place, of the baskets, of things that we use, and of the stories. And I just love that. It's so much fun. And there's little tabs on them, so we could pick them up after the colored frit is laid upon them. And that is Dan putting the frit onto the metal pieces. And then we use glass and stringers and all kinds of things to give the glass texture. And heat it up. We've got to heat it up before we get it in. And so my job at the foundry, no, it's a glass place. I forget what it is. I have to not call the kilns, you know, they're furnaces, and so I've got a lot to learn, and so this is the frit that's being preheated, and then Dan rolls the piece over the metal, and more magic just continues to happen. And then here's the glass pieces. The glass pieces are, I wanted to start using them sparingly because Dan works so hard and so fast that I needed a whole lot of work to keep him busy. And here they are, they're finished. I think they're so beautiful. The multi-layers of them is just really interesting to me. And this is the piece that's over at the museum. Picking out colors, doing everything that I was there working with Dan for 4 days, and it was so much fun. And then Stonington Gallery in Seattle said, oh, we've got time to do a show, a collaborative show with you and Dan's work. And when I walked into the gallery, I about fell over, you know. Imagine the sense of pride when you see all these pieces. Because it was the first time I'd seen them because they're too heavy for me to hold, and I couldn't pack them up and bring them home. So Dan took them to the glass finisher and finished them for me, and took them to the photographer, had them photographed for me, and took them back to the gallery. And they're still at the gallery except for 3 pieces. And so, but finding something to do has just, at my age, is just really exciting, you know. It means you can continue, you could do anything you want. There's a lot of smart people out there to help you. And so that's it. Okay.
Corwin, Corky Clairmont, was born at the St. Ignacio Mission on the Flathead Reservation in Montana. In 1984, after living in Los Angeles for 14 years, Clairmont returned to the Flathead Reservation where he lives and works today. Clairmont is a part of an important group of Native American artists who use their cultural experiences and background in combination with techniques such as printmaking and photography to bring attention to the traditions and challenges that are part of the lives of Native people in their communities. Clairmont is a 2003 Idle Jorg Fellow and has exhibited his work across the U.S. His work is included in many public and private collections. Please join me in welcoming Corky Clairmont.
Good evening. It's just a real pleasure to be here, and I appreciate all that Ryan has done and the museum here. They're really terrific in sponsoring our tribal community, and I especially appreciate the introduction because it named and listed all the tribes, you know, that are part of this area. And I think that's good to know because it's seldom you begin things with mentioning our and being respectful of the tribal communities. Our tribe is Salish tribes are considered the furthest interior Salish tribes. It's northwestern Montana, just a little north of Missoula, at one time our tribe, Salish people, were plains people as well. We hunted the buffalo and were out in the plains 9 months out of the year. And some of our members actually were there year round. But so we have this great connection from Montana all the way to the coast, where you have coastal Salish. So we're all connected in that way, and I really feel that our tribal communities as a whole are all connected, because we share a lot of real similar kinds of stories and beliefs and how we feel about place. It's always been extremely important, and the work that I do generally deals with place and especially a tribal community. I'm showing an image right now of a monument that the tribe had wanted to welcome home our veterans and those that served. And so I began the process of trying to come up with a image, that, or something that would do that, and it turned out to be about a 4-year project. Let's see, I'm not sure how to go to the next one.
The down arrow?
Hmm?
The down arrow on the keyboard?
The down arrow on the keyboard.
Oh, the down arrow on the keyboard. This guy here? Okay. Great. I wanted to come in and rehearse for about 2 hours, but they didn't have the time. Okay. So I took that to show you kind of the scale of the piece. And the eagle, of course, is important to us. So it's over, I suppose standing on the ground, it's probably 12 feet high or more. It's made out of granite. This is the backside, and I was looking for something that would unify them, because I'm from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, and both are quite different. And I was looking for something that had it was important to both tribes, and the coyote, factored in. You hear the coyote stories and those things. It's very important. So you see here the coyote with the pups in the background, 4 little pups, and the kind of ring around it. And the rings I was using as a symbol of our stories. All the stories have been handed down for over 10,000 years. And it's not, at the bottom, the ring is incomplete because the pups are there, they're going to carry us into the future, so we have more stories to tell. But this is the backside of the eagle that you've seen in the front. And then there's some sacred plants and things that are also part of the design. Then the white buffalo on either side with the names of our warriors that have been sandblasted in. And the 2 figures on either side of the eagle are our warriors, the woman warrior and the male warrior. The male warrior is used an image of Chief Charlo, and the lady on the left is a composite of several beautiful warrior ladies. And when I was working on that, I felt it was important to make them the same size, because the women certainly had as much to do with our survival as the men. And that was kind of interesting, some of the discussion that took place, because there was a couple of men that was sitting around in the elders meeting, and, well, I don't think the women are warriors, blah, 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 And the women got elder ladies there. You should have seen their eyes. They could cut right through those men, because we did have some renowned, fierce women warriors. Plus, they stayed behind many times when the men would be off. They'd have to be there watching over the children and providing for them. So they definitely had a big role in our community. Getting a shot of the backside. And this is a print that I did. It was before Trump decided to run for office, and what you see there is a Trump tie on the left, and it's is Donald Trump's signature collection tie, silk made in China. And the gummy bear that you see in the middle is wearing one of his ties, and the raven is trying to take it away from him. Then at the bottom is a stamp USA Forever that's been canceled out somehow. And this next few pieces deal with a project. It's you've probably heard of the tar sands or oil sands mining in Canada. It's taken place in an area called around Fort McMurray, and it's the Fort McMurray area is the largest inland delta on the continent. So all the waters are coming in there, and this is a site where they're mining over 50 square miles of the tar sands. And they're just it's a place where these beautiful boreal forests, were covering the landscape, and fresh waters coming in there. Just a beautiful area. And when they started doing the mining, they scrape off the topsoil, and then they dig out the tar, or start processing the tar, and when they process that stuff, they create these large lakes. I mean, they're huge, that are highly toxic, and they put little scarecrows out in the lakes, to try to keep the birds from flying in. And they also have these sound or concussion guns that go off every so often to try to keep them away too, but it really doesn't work very well. They brag about once they mine it, they're supposed to go back and rehab the land. I think 1% of the land has been rehabbed to a degree. But it's like all the wildlife that's been lost up there, especially the bear and the deer and others. You can't pick up their bones and blow on it and expect them to jump back up. They're gone. They're gone. I was talking about this with John Quixie Smith the other day, and she said, "Yeah, only coyote can do that." Because we have coyote stories about coyote being able to resuscitate us. But in thinking about those things, this is one of the pieces. It's just one of those oil lamps, and there's little dinosaurs at the base there. And those are little gummy bears, and I was using the gummy bears as a kind of metaphor for the loss of the animal life, at Fort McMurray, because there was like 130 or more bears, that had been extinguished in just a few months' time, because they're looking for food. They wander into the man camps in areas where they're not welcome, and they're just destroyed. So I thought that'd be a good metaphor. Plus, when you're, because they are gummy bears, they're all over the place. You can't go into a store without seeing gummy bears by the candy shelf. So I thought, well, use that gummy bear, then you go in and buy that candy, or you see that candy, it might remind you then of the destruction that's going on up there. This is what started it all. They were moving these mega loads through our lands in Montana, and these are huge machines, and you can see by the gross weight and stuff how much they weigh. So there's a lot of protesting going on at the time. People trying to block that activity. And when I found out it was headed to Fort McMurray, then I planned a trip to Fort McMurray and then try to develop something that addressed that. And this is a beautiful piece that's in the show. And of course you see the double-headed arrow. And the double-headed arrow is something I've used in these particular projects towards Fort McMurray. And the idea behind that was when you come to a T intersection, a lot of times you'll see that double-headed arrow. As a warning sign, it says, you have to stop and make a decision, go one way or the other, right or left, or go over the bank. But and so I thought with that simple image of the double-headed arrow, I could talk about, we're at a point now where we just have to make the right decisions. We can't be making bad choices. And this has to do with who we put in the office, as well as how we conduct ourselves, as human beings. And that's something, again, always comes back to us as people, as human beings. When I speak of 10,000 plus years, I'm talking about those that came before me. They showed us a way to go. 10,000 years. And keeping in mind with having a respectful relationship with place, we need to look forward 10,000 years just to honor our ancestors and who we are as a people. That's where Lillian's work is so strong. It's there. Those are the stories. Those are the things that we learn. Those are the path that was put in front of us to go. So we can do it. We can, but we just have to kind of rethink a lot of things here. This is one of the double-headed arrow prints that I did at a location in China. I'd had an opportunity to go to China, and so I did a couple of pieces there, but you can see the little compass there I laid down, and it's pointing the arrow basically in the northern direction. And you see the little gummy bears arranged on the medicine wheel. And it was kind of interesting when I was in China, we staying at this hotel, and we got out and went into the little candy store there, and they had candy items, and here was Chinese gummy bears. So I don't know if you see it on that first one, but so I decided because I had American gummy bears with me too, so I kind of paired up the gummy bears, put one Chinese gummy bear and one American gummy bear. You kind of see them in pairs down there. So I'd left this segment in place at the location and kept the part that I tore in half with me. Okay, now I need to get into the other one, which is the techno system. Yes, please.
Yeah, let's just do
Escape. Oh, there we go.
and then we could do that. Should we hit play?
Okay, so I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. The Keystone Pipeline protest movement was really so important. It brought together over 10,000 people at different times. And the Standing Rock people that were protesting this piece, or the pipeline, it was the Keystone Pipeline, and the Keystone Pipeline, its origination is Fort McMurray. The piece that you're looking at now, because it's going to be a little jumbled here, the tic-tac-toe piece. And I put the tic-tac-toe piece together, and you can see the little gummy bear texture in the background of each print. It's an actual game you can play, because I wanted to accentuate too the dangerous games, that those companies are playing with our lives our environment and our future. So that was one way to talk about it. The piece that you see now with the double-headed arrows, I started at the Missoula Art Museum and headed north. And I left that half arrow print every 50 miles until I actually got to Fort McMurray. Did the same thing, and I pointed the camera in 4 directions to capture that particular site and location as I was traveling. And I put it all on, I mounted it on plastic. And I was adhering these pieces to the plastic, big sheets of plastic. It occurred to me that, well, these are dinosaur hides. And it kind of brought me back to the winter count, where you put significant, something significant on the hide every year, encircled to tell the story. So these became dinosaur hides, and so which is looking at now is the series of prints that I did, as I went to Fort McMurray. I'll just let it kind of rotate through. And the 50-mile stop, 50-mile stop was kind of a random thing. Random meaning every 50 miles I didn't know exactly what was going to be there. And I wanted to do it in that way because I wasn't creating a travel brochure. I was documenting a specific site, and every site has its importance, to the whole. And I think that's really important to remember, that everything that exists out here is important no matter where you are. It has importance. And we look at the Creator, he made it that way. It's all supposed to fit together in a beautiful way so that we can live in a beautiful way. A lot of canola fields in Canada. And I guess the canola was a plant that the botanists up there created. It wasn't a natural plant, it's hybrid. And something like in the 70s, I guess they did that. But you see it all over now up there. So you can see these are pretty kind of random, kind of different sites. Now this piece here was one piece that I did. It's on the Yellowstone River. And the Yellowstone River, there's a significant break in a pipe, oil pipe, not far from the river, and it contaminated the river several miles. And the one piece that was flashed up there for a minute was, see the arrows coming in the 4 different directions? That was the last site. And when I talked about the 1% of reclaimed land, okay, well, that was the place they reclaimed. And they brought in some buffalo there to let everybody know that it's a healthy place now. Yeah, when I was at the Standing Rock, the clergymen of the area wanted to meet with the governor. And it was that Friday that we were there, and so some 300 or more clergymen went to the Capitol building in Bismarck, wanting to talk to the governor. And the governor at one point had agreed to talk to him. Well, sometime in the afternoon, the governor slipped out the back door and really upset the clergymen, because they were coming from all over, to meet with him, can talk about things with him, and because he didn't show up, they decided to have a sit-in. So they all just stayed there, and came time to close things down. They began to escort the clergy people out, and some of them kind of refused to go, and so they started handcuffing them and moving them out and taking them to jail. And unfortunately, one of the elders, clergyman, actually had a heart attack and died right there, which is really unfortunate. Those things never reached the newspapers. There was a surveillance plane that was constantly flying overhead, and when it left the area, another one showed up, and they were constantly monitoring the camps. And and they would also had something in their planes or whatever that would stop any communication from coming out, so the people in the camp were having trouble sending information out, of the area. They'd jam the airways or something with those planes. People were there from all over the world, and all of our Indian nations sent flags, to the camp, as well as other countries. There was over 350 flags posted at the camp. So, but there's the Chews, and one of the signs that, or the large photograph that you see there, they posted is Journey to Zero. I don't know if you had a chance to read that, but Journey to Zero, and this is posted outside of one of their plants, because I chartered a plane and flew over the area, but also the next day I took a tour bus and went around to the different camps or different places, and that was one of the photographs I took. I put little gummy bears on the sign, or by the sign there, because it was in a big tire. And got back on the bus and was sitting down, and the tour guide came back on the bus, and she's all excited, and she said, "Oh, I noticed somebody was photographing gummy bears." And then she proceeded to say, "Well, did you know that the Suncor Corporation furnishes the lubricant to the gummy bear company so they don't stick together?" So that was a surprise to me, but it really fit into the nature of the project. Okay. I could probably get out of this now.
So next we're going to welcome up Nicholas Galanin. For over a decade, Galanin has been embedding incisive observation into his work, investigating and expanding intersections of culture and concept in form, image, and sound. Galanin's work embody critical thought. They are vessels of knowledge, culture, and technology, inherently political, generous, unflinching, and poetic. His practice is expansive and includes numerous collaborations with visual and recording artists. He is a member of two artist collectives, the Black Constellation and Winter Count. Galanin apprenticed with master carvers and jewelers, earned his BFA at London Guildhall University in jewelry design, and his MFA in Indigenous visual art at Massey University in New Zealand. He lives and works with his family in Sitka, Alaska. Please welcome Nicholas Galanin.
Something to bring you guys over while I'm here. No. Thanks for having me. This is my latest collaboration with Merritt Johnson, who's here. And I just wanted to introduce to you baby Atugani, who was born a month ago, so healthy and happy. Yeah, great to be here. I've just got a few images, and then I don't want to take up too much time from our discussion. So I really enjoyed everything you guys have shared. And yeah, I'm Nicholas Galanin, Yatsin, Tlingit Unanga from Sitka, Alaska. And some of the work that I'm going to share with you starts off, I work with concepts generally, so I consider myself a multidisciplinary artist. I work around ideas, whether it's video, sculpture, photography, music. This particular work is an ongoing series that started in 2006, around 2006 or 2005. I think I was developing the work in 2004 maybe, but the series is thousands of pages cut and bound into book forms, and a lot of that came from the realities of being indigenous and having to experience culture, your community's culture, through institutions, much like this museum, through institutions that have our bones next to dinosaur bones still. I was just recently in Chicago at the Field Museum, and they still have human remains in their archives and in their basements. I've been over to Europe, where I've seen human remains in these spaces. Hundreds of thousands of our cultural atu, our cultural objects, removed from our communities and placed into these spaces, still circulate not only amongst institutional spaces, but also even through, there's still gallerists that sell our objects. Last time I was here in Portland, there's a gallery, I don't know where it was, down the street, that had Chilkat weaving, which is a Northwest Coast ceremonial object. Those objects still show up in auction houses in exchanges for hundreds of thousands of dollars. A lot of that work is active in the historical realities of displacement of our communities, displacement of our knowledge, displacement of our land, our bodies, our resource, something that's happening still today in Alaska and Sitka. In my community, the herring fishery is going on, and it's very contested right now. The Sitka tribe is suing the state right now for mismanagement, ADF&G, who's been, the herring stock's been dwindling heavily, and the commercial fishery is something that we can control amongst anything else immediately, and so a lot of our community would like to see that stopped. Those conversations echo the buffalo, echo the removal of our sustenance from our communities. With this work, what have we become is originally pulling from anthropological texts, so Smithsonian Institution published in the 70s a three-part anthropological series on Tlingit culture. A lot of that text is pre-contact, post, like just around that era, where our identity is heavily romanticized. Our authenticity is based on that romanticization of that identity that's captured by often Western or non-Indigenous lens, and then homogenized into text, anthropological text. So this series was exploring that and how our elders' words and wisdom had become homogenized to mine for value. In this case, mined for value that is written word. The irony of that elder knowledge still actively ignored purposefully in context of science right now for our fisheries. When our elders tell stories about how our fisheries had been, it doesn't provide economy or commerce to said institutions, so that becomes a myth in that instance, opposed to knowledge. So what have we become is a series that's actively been exploring that. This work is White Noise American Prayer Rug. It's hand-knotted prayer rug. It's actually, this will be in the Whitney in May. Next May is one of the works, which I'm excited for them to include because of the politics in institutions like the Whitney that we witness right now with funding and funding sources, because of the politics historically in institutions, like as I've just explained to you, how institutions are built, how their objects came to be in these spaces. I was recently in the Natural History Museum's archives in New York and visiting my ancestral objects and going through just documents as well, collection documents in their files, and the wording that was used in those removed from a grave, or, you know, it's not saying theft, it's not saying anything else that would be utilized right now in today's laws to explain how these objects had become into these spaces or places. We Dreamt Death. This is a project that I had been meaning to create for years, probably 10 years or so, but it's hard to source polar bears. And in this context, the very specific polar bear that was this is actually two polar bears combined. As found taxidermy, the bear that was shot in this image was shot in the 60s by a white sport hunter in Shishmarov, which is a village in Alaska that is today, due to climate change, falling back into the ocean. So it's relevant in that context as well, of how our actions here and elsewhere influence, you know, other landscapes, how these disconnections to land and to place also influence that. This work's currently on exhibit in the Honolulu Biennial, which I think I get a chance to go out there in May, so I'm looking forward to seeing the work that's up there. And this is an installation that was just up at a gallery in Brooklyn, open source gallery. The value of sharpness when it falls, it's 60 porcelain hatchets suspended and spinning through the air. Conversation of this work is a reflection of the tools indigenous communities are often given by government to survive. And oftentimes those tools are useless. They don't reflect our own independent sovereignty, our abilities to survive in these spaces. So examples of that would be even our hunting and subsistence laws, that we still really struggle and fight for just tiny portions of what's actually being commercially harvested, et cetera, in these spaces. So, or how a lot of these laws historically were written to exclude us completely from these conversations. And so in an installation like this, the value is not actually in the form of the tool that's supposed to be doing that job, because these hatchets will shatter, obviously. The value is in the pieces that we can pick up from that with our resilience. The value is in the sharp edges of the shards of these hatchets when they've shattered. And with indigenuity, we will be able to utilize that for something more purposeful. So yeah, I think that's it. I don't want to take any more of your time.
I'd like to welcome all of the artists to come and sit for panel questions. We'll do about 17 minutes of panel discussion, followed up with about 13 minutes for Q&A from the audience. Thank you.
Check. You guys can come in and have a seat if there's seats around. Join us.
I'm going to start with some general questions that anyone is welcome to kind of jump in and answer in respect to your practice. So I wanted to start with talking about themes and content and how that relates to materiality. In all of your work, you explore a lot of different materials, and I'm wondering how the content or themes in your work have informed your material choices.
Can you say that again?
How has the content or themes in your work informed your material choices?
I think that's a question that's always one potential layer in the process and work for my practice, especially at least. And it's oftentimes something I need to consider if it's going to be wrapped into the conversation and layers of the work. So I try to find the best fit of material and process to the idea to present the strongest conversation and idea without too many distractions along the way. So.
Is this on? Okay. Can't hear myself think. I try to come up with projects, that maybe discuss issues, and I'm familiar with the printmaking area, and also installation types of work. Generally speaking, I just think in that direction, and the materials and the different things come in that are a part of what I'm trying to talk about or discuss. It just kind of naturally kind of falls into place. Usually it takes months, to really come up with the format and a way of dealing with the objectives. The first piece that you were looking at, the welcoming home our veterans and our giving honor to our warriors. The tribe pretty much dictated the material. They wanted something substantial, a monument. And they said, well, the Veterans Monument honoring the Vietnam warriors in Washington, D.C., they could really relate to that. So, of course, I guess I need to do this out of rock or stone or something like that. And it took a while to find a company, that had the stone that we were looking at, and a big consideration for that was because we had had a lot of choices for stone, was that the stone had to be somehow a part of our community, and I went to Cold Springs Granite Company out of Minnesota. They had the largest inventory of stones, and they've done monuments all over the United States. And so in looking at their stones, I selected the black stone that you see there that had beautiful crystals, throughout it. And what I was thinking about also was the climate that stone was mined in was similar to the climate on our reservation in terms of the hot and the cold and stuff. There's a lot of the stone now coming into the country are coming from India, Africa, and other parts of the world. So I thought that was an important consideration. And as we were working the stone, I'd make trips out to the company. And one of the last, before they started cutting the stone or creating the images on the stone, I'd gone out there and because I wanted to talk to the stone, letting the stone know that, what we wanted it to do. And I had, of course, a smudge and stuff there, and the plant employees were curious about what I was doing, so they all came out, when I was doing the smudging, on the stone, and I did talk to them about the nature of what they were to do and how important it was. And it seemed to create, this really supportive environment and understanding, which is something I guess they hadn't really experienced before. And once the stone was cut and the images sandblasted in, they put it on trucks and sent it to our reservation. And the monument itself is right outside of our tribal complex. And when they're bringing the stone out, the central part with the eagle, he has the large eyes, that are piercing and looking. The tarp that they had on it kept flipping off, so her eyes are always exposed. And it happened all the way out. And then when I was setting up the monument, I also tarped it because I wanted it to be a surprise, how you'd want to do the unveiling. And and the tarp that I put on, no matter how I tried to anchor it, it kept flying off. That eagle wanted to know where it was.
Lillian, She Who Watches is such a powerful and inspirational figure. Do you see your choice to translate her from an image on stone into glass as imparting any new connotations or meanings?
Not really any new meaning other than a new expression of her, in relation to because she's been there for thousands of years, we really don't know exactly what's behind the image. And, but all I know is she overlooked my people. And so she's like a watcher, she's a storyteller, she's a guardian, and so I think whatever medium I use, I want to impart all of these, and that way I'm true to myself and true to my people, true to my culture. Does that make sense? Okay. Gotta make sense.
Nicholas, the use of mirrors in byproduct complicates the viewer's relationship with the piece. Can you talk about the way the mirror informs how it can be read or interpreted by the viewer?
Yeah. I mean, specifically, that conversation and byproduct is our in relationship to our culture and our community being fed upon, ourselves, our knowledge, are being preyed upon, being turned into a product. The culture of, or the economy of culture, and a mirror is obviously a reflection of that, I suppose. So it's pretty straightforward, I think. But yeah.
What are important aspects of your practice that are invisible from the outside? And this is a question for any of the panelists.
I don't understand the question.
Are there any important aspects to your artistic practice that are invisible to the outside, to the audience, things about your practice that you'd like to share that you don't think that people always see?
I think my work's so transparent that there's, you know, as I am, and so I don't have anything, you know, that I would want to give any subliminal messages to, and so, but I am doing great. It's great things with the Kritvik is doing a Fisher's Memorial that will honor the lost fishermen and reminder for the present fishermen to be safe, and this is something that I'm having to keep to myself, because it's a collaboration and because it isn't for me. And so it's an important job that the fishermen are safe to continue with the fishing and to continue our livelihoods. And so it's about we're going to be through in a couple of years and it will be up. And so I'm doing things like that, you know, it will be, my name will be out of the picture. It's not about me. It's about the fishermen. So does that answer it? Okay.
With Instagram, Facebook, I think you guys see everything these days, probably. So, unless I blocked you or something for. I think the work on the land, at home, connecting with the land and subsistence, and a lot of that feeds into everything else in a way that people might not recognize, and that really is a binding connection through everything, through continuum of history of the work that I partake and participate in, to some of the works I've shared with you even now, and I think that's probably.
Corky, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, looking at our work, you know, the presentations tonight were so terrific. Something that comes across, I think, is the understanding that our tribal communities are, you know, there's a lot of beauty within our tribal communities, and the spirit of our people is so strong. And the work that I've seen, you know, represents that. All the pieces, you could see beauty within the pieces, you know, and there's touching, you know, our souls of our tribal people. And hopefully what that does, it'll encourage you to maybe try to research and understand our tribal communities more. You know, the art is kind of an opening of the door, and then hopefully you can continue your investigation and also support of the tribes and the important issues, you know, that they're up against. Something that I'll give it to everybody tonight is a 1855 Treaty of Hellgate. And I took the entire treaty and shrunk it down to the size of a credit card when you fold it. So, you know, it was our a gold card, you know, we didn't want to leave home without. Because when I returned back home in '84, you know, I really wanted to re-emerge myself back into the community. And I realized that I really hadn't read the treaty, you know, setting aside this land, you know, for tribes. And, you know, looking at the area that our tribe once would go walk in, you know, the lands that we have now is like a little speck compared to the amount of area that we once were able to go out and gather our resources and needs. And that's where the tar sands issue is so important, because, you know, it almost eliminated the tribal community up there where they can't go out and gather their traditional foods, the fish and the wildlife and the bear and trap and their medicines. You know, they destroyed all those areas, and the people up there are suffering from cancers and all kinds of things, and it's like they're expendable. I mean, so there's still huge things like that out there that most people, you know, it doesn't come into your consciousness, you know, that those things are happening, but they're happening a lot. And then the example of going to Standing Rock is another example, you know, of the continuation of that mentality that just has to stop. I don't know if that answered the question.
It does. It's very much part of that role an artist plays in community that's outside of whatever lives in a gallery. The work, all of the work that happens before something that is considered art is made. I think thank you so much for sharing your experience on that. And I think at this point we're going to go to questions to the audience.
So I once heard, when I lived in Alaska, I heard Larry Avakana talking about the difficulty of doing glass work in the Arctic. But, you know, Lillian just mentioned how expensive it is to do glass work. And it's almost a barrier to entry, whether it's geographic or even here where we have, I mean, in Portland, we have so many glass resources. In the whole Northwest, we have so many glass resources. But it's still, it's expensive and difficult to get into. So as a barrier to entry for young Native American artists who want to get into, how do people work around that to just get into the field? I mean, I know that, you know, maybe Tilchuk has been really open, or what are some of the ways that younger artists are getting into glass work?
Got to write good grants, and that's what helped me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do 13 pieces, and wouldn't be able. And then you save and save and save, and have a little more control of what you're trying to get from the glass. And if you're thinking of marketing, you don't. I don't have the clientele, because I've been an artist for so many years, that, you know, the economy is changing to the point that people don't want to pay $7,000 for a piece of glass. You know, they want to make sure they have coffee money. And so, and so it takes a lot of planning and, you know, and a lot of collaboration. And so you just keep talking to people and telling them what it is you want to do, what you're hoping to do. And then people come up with good ideas, and you just stay open to good ideas. I've got another grant, and I get to work in glass in July. And so I'm just really looking so forward to that.
Congratulations on the grant. That's great.
It's small, but
Yeah.
I couldn't do it without it.
Yeah, Portland has Native Arts and Culture Foundation, which is also a really magnificent, supportive program to apply and try to get funding for projects that are out of reach at times. And there's other most artists that have been making work for any amount of time have the list of where and what is, you know, resource for stuff like that. So.
Something that I'm really interested in is the traditional work and how for so long it was lost. And I know that up in Juneau, I think it was Juneau, you made a poll with all of the ancestors and the images and everything. And I was fascinated by watching you do it, because I think some of it you were learning how to do it from other people. And I'm wondering how your traditions are passed on, and for some people they were lost, and how are you finding those traditions again?
White teachers and white anthropologists and white historians. And yes, no, that's a great question. That totem project for me was the first project where I was a lead carver, but I'd been training for that for 20 years, like through work with my father, my uncle, other carvers in the community. And during that project, I was training 5 other apprentices. So that's how our continuum has survived, and that's why it's still here, literally. There is a large myth of culture not being retained in communities, and I think that's overstated often, or it's not true, I should say. Anyways, we retain a lot of that, and that even that process of training 4 or 5 apprentices on that job, that's witnessing that in motion. Or my children, when I share that to them, it's witnessing that process in motion. So there was drastic change that happened in a lot of our communities, from the genocide of building America and removing our language and even our education systems in place in our own communities. But we've still fought and had elders that have retained as much as they can, and there's people working really hard right now, continually trying to keep that moving forward. So I don't ever really think of it as things have been lost in that sense, and I think there's way too much, way too many examples of that right now, of brilliance in Indigenous community where it has been shared through continuum and retained. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that sentiment. Kind of an example would be a lot of people feel that the last Indian died around time of dances with wolves. That's where the real Indians were. I don't know who you guys are, but those are the real Indians. That stigma is there. I mean, is perpetuated over and over and over again. Our tribal communities are alive and well, and these things are being passed on. A good example is Linda King's work, my beautiful lady. She did the Sally bag for me when I had the opening at the MAM Museum. It's tic-tac-toe. So she's carrying on a lot of important traditions like that. She taught teepee construction for years and years at our college, and how to make outfits and different things. And I was sitting in my office at our college one day, and I heard this tap, 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 outside of my window. And I looked out, and here all the students were lined up along the sidewalk, and we had just brought in a bunch of river rock to use as kind of a little bank, landscape work. And the instructor was teaching indigenous tool making. And he had all the students lined up out there, and they went out and they selected these rock, to make tools, and they were making clubs or maybe something to hit on your head, and they had to select the stones to do it, and so I dropped what I was doing. I went outside, and the stones presented themselves to me, and I took 2 stones, and I began tapping on this stone. And it was like, it's kind of like magic. I was transported back hundreds of years in that instant. I felt my ancestors there. And, you're holding the stone that was presented to you by the stone, because we think things like that, when you're looking for something, it'll present itself to you. But it brought back a lot of really important things to me. And some, when you're looking at a picture in a book or something and reading about it, you don't catch that. But these are the kinds of things that are happening. And in Montana, we're really fortunate. We have 7 Indian reservations, and each one has a tribal college. And language is really important, and all the colleges are teaching our tribal languages as well as important tribal things. And we do have culture committees which govern a lot of things. You're able to go there and they share, different things. And we still have our ceremonies and things that are constantly going on. These are things that are not out there in the public, really. But there's a lot going on. And, I invite you to our powwows and things that we have. We have, especially in Arlee, every year we have a 4th of July celebration. We don't really call it a powwow, but a celebration. And during our grand entry, we do the traditional snake dance and we'll have up to anywhere from 500 to 800 dancers coming in, in their traditional outfits and their fancy dance outfits, their jingle dresses, and and you hear the beat of that drum. It's a beat of our mother's heart, coming in, and you're out there and you're dancing. Okay, we're alive and well. We have respect for our ancestors, and we look for 10,000 years more.
Hi, this is a question for Lillian. In the past, I've heard you talk about working in glass and what glass offers that you particularly like about glass. And I don't remember the specifics, so I was wondering if you could repeat what it is that glass as a medium offers you as an artist.
Well, when I first started, it was with Mr. Bartow, and there was a collector who loved glass, and he loved Rick's work and my work, and he gave us 3 glass-making workshops so he could get buy a Bartow and buy a Lillian Pitt at a very fair price. And so I don't mind being manipulated like that. That was fun. And so what the first one was sand casting, and that was really a lot of fun. And but it was too hard for me to do, and so it was physically hard. So then the next class was just casting, and that was, since I used my clay as the original, it was very easy, to transfer to the glass and casting it. And then I made my shadow spirits, which are images that I took from the petroglyphs, and I made them my own using nature to impress upon them. And then when they turned out, they seemed to have a spiritual quality about them that wasn't really mine. It was there. And so, and I have loved it since, and now with blown glass, I can do the same thing with the tools that were offered to me. And so, and I just love all the mediums I work with. And I did, knowing what you were saying about doing the stone carving, I had a job in Hillsborough, and I was paid to do 20 petroglyph images. And then I just changed them to make them mine, because I didn't want to, what do they call that word? Appropriation. I didn't want to appropriate my work because it was for a town that wasn't really mine. And so, but I had a friend come from Seneca came from Pennsylvania to teach me how to carve the stone, and it was basalt, and it was so hard. And it was, but then once I started doing it, oh my gosh, I just turned into something so ancient. Like you were saying, it does something to your soul. And it's just magic. And so all my medium I love it all. So. We've answered every question in the world. Go out and solve the problems.